9 years ago, my grandfather emailed me and my dad and invited us to go down to Florida because he was having a reunion with people that he had served with in World War II. My dad and I were excited because we didn't get to see him that often, but we decided that we wanted this trip to have a purpose. We decided that when we went down there, we were going to interview my grandfather and as many other men as possible so we could record their stories before they were lost forever. One of these stories that my grandfather told me was, because he was the flight engineer in a B-29, it was his job to fix any problems that happened in flight. During one of their missions, they started losing engines and losing engines fast. They pinpointed the problem down to the bomb bay, which is where all the bombs are stored. When he got down there, he discovered there was about a foot of fuel leaking from a pipe. They were flying 10,000 to 15,000 feet up. So flying that high, he had to open the bomb bay doors, walk across a thin metal beam to the other side, looking at the vast ocean below him, and duct tape the pipe closed to stop the leak. I had never heard this story before. My mother had never heard this story before, and my grandmother had never heard this story before. And that wasn't unique for just my grandfather. For most of these men, them telling these stories to me and my dad was the first time they were being told since they had happened. Even though I was in 4th grade, I realized that that was an issue, that these stories are important and they need to be heard, and the only way to hear them is to sit down, talk, and listen. And before I went on that trip in 4th grade with my dad, I had no idea what I wanted to do in my life. I was just a 4th grader. But on that flight home, I immediately knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to be just like my grandfather and those other men I'd interviewed. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Once I graduate high school, I'll be attending Virginia Tech as a member of the Army Corps of Cadets and will graduate as a 2nd lieutenant in the Army. Because of that, I wanted to do a modern version of what I did with my grandfather, but this time with younger veterans, to see what their life was like coming back from their service. With the help from some fantastic teachers from this high school, I was able to go to my local VA holiday party and talk to some of these men and women. The first question I wanted to ask them was, what has the VA done for you, and what could they do better? When I first started asking that question, it was a bit awkward at first. I didn't know how to approach them or even give them enough time to answer the question itself. Slowly but surely, I was able to get to a point where I could have these deep and personal conversations with people I had just met and feel comfortable doing so. One of the first men I interviewed, who was in his early 20s, he told me that for him, the VA was able to get him clean and into rehab after his service. The one thing they couldn't do, though, was find him work. He was only working 3 to 4 hours a week and eventually got discouraged and quit, and now just goes from VA to VA. He said that the VA is too accustomed to the older veterans and not the younger ones who are still looking for work. Another veteran I talked to, who was a little bit older in his late 50s, he said that for him, healthcare was his biggest issue. He had to have a major dental surgery, and after waiting over 3 months, the VA did nothing. He had to pay out of pocket and go to a private practice, which almost made him homeless, as a lot of the money that he spent was supposed to go towards his rent. For a lot of the men that I talked to, they had back problems, knee issues, and hearing loss, and they just weren't addressed by the VA. We read about online and see on TV and the news that the VA is understaffed, underfunded, and underpaid, and we think to ourselves, wow, that's terrible. But seeing how these men and women are affected in their daily lives and how it impacts them and their families, it made an issue personal for me for something I had never gone through. The second question I wanted to ask these men and women was, how can someone like me, someone who's never served, approach you, a veteran, and ask you if you need help or if you want to talk? The first answer I got was a lot deeper and darker than I ever could have expected. A veteran told me that we aren't Rambo, we aren't Superman. These issues affect us just like they affect you, and we need the same help, but people don't think of us that way. He told me how when he came back from Afghanistan, he was suffering from PTSD and depression. He was going to be living with his parents, and he had a brother who was about 15 or 16 at the time. One night, that brother came up to his room and sat on his bed. He asked him if he wanted to talk, not about his service, not about what he did, but just talk in general. That man credits that small yet important conversation with saving his life. He told me that at that moment, when that brother came up to talk to him, he realized that he had a problem, and he needed help. And without that, he would not know where he would be right now. When we open up these conversations and try to help someone, you have to realize that we can't do everything that we think we can. One veteran told me quite bluntly, but it was something I needed to hear. He told me that, why would I want to talk to you? You don't understand me. Doctors, therapists, psychiatrists, they don't help me. The only people that I want to talk to that can help me are their veterans, because they at least know what I went through. And that's one thing that I realized the VA does really well. It provides a support group of men and women who share common experiences and can talk to each other about anything, and in doing so, can try to help each other out. These conversations are so important because they can save a life. According to the VA mental health report, over 20 veterans commit suicide a day. of over 100,000 veterans returning back from Iraq and Afghanistan, where 25% are diagnosed with one or more distinct mental illness within their first year returning back from combat. Now, I'm not a veteran or mental health expert, so I can't speak from the perspective of either, but I can tell you that that number is way too high. When opening up these conversations, as I said before, we have to realize that these issues are widespread. When I first started talking to the men and women at the VA, I very quickly had to become comfortable with being uncomfortable in these situations. And I also had to learn that by pushing for someone to talk, trying to push them to get answers, that can be almost as bad, if not worse, as doing nothing at all. Another thing I learned was how to take no as an answer. I had to understand when my presence wasn't welcomed in a conversation and when it was my time to leave. If you want to open up one of these conversations, try using the phrase, "I'm here if you need me." That phrase affected every man and woman that I talked to at that VA that night. For many of them, they were the first to serve in their families after 9/11, so when they came back, they felt alone. They didn't have that sense of brotherhood that became so important to each and every one of them. But that phrase is not saying you have an issue and you need help. It's saying, "I'm here for you. If you want to talk, I'm here to listen. If you want to listen, I'm here to talk." That phrase, it's that brother going up to his room and asking if he's okay. It's a daughter going up to her father and asking if he's all right. It's a friend calling you and asking you why you've been acting different. These men and women, they're willing to give their lives for us. So the least we can do is give them some of our time and try to get that number down to 0. Thank you.